Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasadi Gaur Bhaktavinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Rama Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. This has been a grueling last few days. Grueling. Hare Krishna. Chaitanya. Hey, Haribol. Thanks for stopping by me. Enter at your own risk, because we're on the outer limits here. It's only the very, very brave or the very, very foolish venture into what's going on. It's just been grueling the last few days. I'm trying to do the 16 rounds because I want to. Hello, Jocelyn. Hare Krishna. Anybody. Because I want the blessings of Srila Prabhupada. And I took a vow years ago to chant 16 rounds and follow 4 regular. That's all he ever asked me to do. He never asked me to do anything else. And so I let it slack off and, just, oh, Krishna and La La Land and, doing this and doing that. But now I want the blessings of Prabhupada. So I'm trying to do these 16 rounds and Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. For one thing, actually going to do that many rounds, you have to get up early. You have to. It's like about 1 hour before sunrise. And start chanting. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Hare Hare. Thank you. Which means you have to take rest early. You can't stay up, 1, 2 in the morning and then get up at like 6. I mean, it doesn't work. You need a certain amount of hours of rest for the body to rejuvenate, refresh. So you have to, 10 the latest, 10 o'clock. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Otherwise, like for me, I'm just like chanting all day and I can't get anything done. And, things I have to do, I have to go shopping, I have to clean the house, the phone rings, I can't just be trying to chant attentively and with full attention and real surrender to Krishna and the holy name once the day starts, especially when the afternoon gets here, because then the whole air is the atmosphere becomes surcharged by the activities of the other living entities, the other people and everything. It gets like charged up, it gets staticky. So before sunrise, most everybody is still sleeping, except those who want to meditate. So the air is fresh and clean, the atmosphere is clear, and chanting. And then as the day wears on, the morning, 8, 9, 10 o'clock, it starts to heat up with the activity, because all the people and the animals and everybody, they're all getting active because the sun comes up. And then by the time nighttime gets here, I mean, the air is just, the atmosphere is just saturated, like it's the mode of ignorance with all the stuff that went on during the day. So then the sun disappears, and they all go to sleep, more or less. Some of them are just getting up, but most of them, they take rest, and the atmosphere clears out. So you have to be in that rhythm, in tune with that, to be able to actually chant effectively. You have to get up early, before the sun comes up. Get a head start. Hare Kṛṣṇa, Hare Kṛṣṇa, Kṛṣṇa Kṛṣṇa, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. So by this chanting like this, with good attention, and reading and hearing from Prabhupada, wow, it's a lot getting churned up. The first thing that happened was I got angry when I heard about how the living entities are created vulnerable to the material energy. Not all of them, just a special group. And then being told, oh, that's because the Lord's given you free will. Minute independence of free will, just like Him. And I'm like, no, there's more to this than that. There's more to this. I want to know the real why. I don't want to just know the what. I don't want to just know the how. I don't want to know the when. And I mean, I don't even want to know the who. I mean, I do, but I want to know why. That's the one that brings it all home, is why. Why? What's the purpose of it all? These living entities, they're tiny, they're vulnerable, and then the creation is explained. Krishna creates this like Disney World material phantasmagoria so they can try to enjoy. He gives them free will so they can try to enjoy. And the phantasmagoria is explained in great detail in the Bhagavatam, the how, and who maintains it, and how they maintain it, and how it works. Okay. But why? Why? That's the most important question, is why, at least to me. And when you think about it, someone who's totally absorbed in just material life, and they're so distant at this point from any kind of spiritual awareness, because they're just so busy all day, getting absorbed in sense activity material. When someone like that gets frustrated, and you have to get frustrated, because even if you have, say, a wonderful partner your whole life, still you get old, you get sick, and one of them dies. So there's frustration and suffering. So when somebody who's just getting frustrated enough, it's so many, and they say, why? Then they can start to get some answers, because they're asking the most important question. Why? Why am I suffering? Why? And they want answers. So there are answers. There are answers. And they start to come in the form of who you are, your spirit, and what this material world is made of, and how it works, and even some instructions on how to act and live in a way that minimize the suffering and help progress on spiritual awareness. So that why opens a door for the what, how, when, who. That's the kind of why. Why? But then somebody's practicing and they've accepted that there's God. And they're following instructions. And they're hearing all about, the what. They're getting knowledge. They're studying scriptures, they're getting knowledge. But what's the purpose of it all? That's the big why. What's the purpose of all of that? What's the purpose of creating the whole material Disneyland? It's like a Disneyland, or a fair, Whee, let's go on the Ferris wheel. Tired of the Ferris wheel. Okay, what about the roller coaster? Okay, do that for a while. No, tired of the roller coaster. Let's go play some games. Maybe we'll win a teddy bear or a Cupid doll or something. All right, did that. The fair is temporary. Thrills and chills, but it's temporary. Prabhupada told a funny little anecdote about a woman who had never been to a fair before, and she went to the fair, and she saw all the fun and excitement, and she started to get upset because she wanted to know, where's everybody going to go when the fair's over? She thought they all lived there. She said, well, where will everybody go when it's over? So this material world, it gets wound down just like a fair. The whole thing wound down. But why? Why create that to begin with? So you get the answer, because you have minute independence, and Krishna's given free will, and you want to. You have some desire to be like a Purusha. You're not a Purusha. You're Shakti, you're energy. You're part of the internal energy. You're not a Purusha, but you have some inclination, since Krishna's your father, to kind of be a Purusha, a controller, enjoyer, rather than a servant like your mother. You want to do the masculine thing, you're not so inclined toward the feminine role, female role, although you are female. I don't care what kind of body you're in. That's just an outfit. Everyone is female in the sense that we're internal energy, and meant to serve Krishna, God. So I'm saying, well, why? What's in it for Krishna that there are these little living entities that he creates this big Disneyland and says, you want that? Here, you want that? Now, it's just different ways to look at that, and that may not be exactly what happened, but if he gives us this vulnerability, and it's not my fault that he created me like that with vulnerability. He created me like that I'm vulnerable. And then he creates this big phantasmagoria and sticks it in front of me And I have to go through 8,400,000 species of life, who knows how many millions of times, being born, dying, being born, dying. So I'm asking, why? And also, how can I get to the point where I can surrender in love to Kṛṣṇa after all of this? He created me like this. He made this big phantasmagoria. I'm vulnerable. He knows that. I'm in here in complete ignorance and darkness for who knows how long. And I'm supposed to now flip the switch. It sounds like a Stockholm syndrome to me, in some ways. You know, Stockholm syndrome? Someone is taken over by another person and tortured. And they develop this attitude that they feel compassion for the one that's taken them over and tortured them. I mean, I'm just looking at this, you know, I'm digging a pit that I'm going to fall into, and because I'm not turning away from Kṛṣṇa. I'm just looking at this and trying to understand why. I mean, I'm helpless and I have to surrender. Kṛṣṇa. But why all of that? Why? Not all of the little living entities go through it. Some are eternally liberated. They're in the spirit. They've been in the day. Maybe what I'm saying is, why me? Well, why me? You know, I could never be one of those that never did go through all of that. Anyway, I'm just looking at it. It's been grueling. A lot of tears. A lot of tears. A lot of crying. And then I look at the prayers, you know, like Lord Chaitanya's prayer, right? He's showing us the perfect devotee in mood of separation from Kṛṣṇa, okay? And he's saying, I want to be, you know, surrendered to you life after life. Just an atom, a dust at your lotus feet. Life after life. Oh no. And I'm looking at the prayers of all the pure devotees, and they say, I don't care what kind of situation I'm in. I don't care what kind of birth, where I am. I just want to remember you. Hare Kṛṣṇa. Oh man, like I say, a lot of tears. Kṛṣṇa. Okay, so there's my... I told you, anybody wandering in here, Kṛṣṇa will have to protect you because... Hare Kṛṣṇa. Okay, let me see if anybody can shed some light on my struggles here. Lance, he says, we're suffering because of this material earthly plane, but we take shelter, we chant. He wants to experience the material nature. He wants us to experience the material nature so we can see we will never be happy. So we develop, hopefully, the desire to serve and surrender to him. He's the source of all happiness, pure happiness. Yeah, well, that would fit in with the verse in the Gita where Kṛṣṇa says, one who, I don't know, surrenders to him or gets this transcendental vision or understanding, forget the verse, goes to the spiritual world and never returns. So that would fit in with what he says in the Gita. If you experience this, you don't want to come back. You're done. You did it. It's over. Yeah, I'm just struggling with it, because I want to really look at it really, really deeply. I really want to, because I know there's a lot to it. It's not just a how question. It's not a mechanical question, like machinery. It's on the emotional plane. And so, Hare Kṛṣṇa. Kṛṣṇa, Kṛṣṇa. Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama. Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Kṛṣṇa, Hare Kṛṣṇa. Kṛṣṇa, Kṛṣṇa. Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama. Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Anyway, sorry about the Stockholm Syndrome thing, but, there's no holds barred, You're going to look at it, you're going to look at it, different angles, Hare Kṛṣṇa. Hare Kṛṣṇa, Hare Kṛṣṇa, Kṛṣṇa, Kṛṣṇa. And I was saying, looking at things this way, I can actually understand why someone would become an impersonalist. It's not just a philosophical thing. It's emotional. Like, they see the material, they have the Vedas, they have the scriptures, and they see it all laid out, the material creation, the material world, and then the personality of Godhead. They see that, they study the scriptures, but they conclude that it's better to go to the Brahma Jyoti, the impersonal Brahman, and not deal with all of this personal stuff. It's more peaceful there. Yeah, it's like suicide. Very peaceful. Ever go to cemetery? Well, not at night, but I mean during the day. It's very peaceful. I could see why someone would be attracted to an impersonal conclusion. Like, after the World War II, a lot of people became atheistic and decided there wasn't any God at all, because they lost their loved ones. So many people, they prayed to God, they prayed to God, they prayed to God, and they lost their husbands or their sons. And so they concluded that there was no one there listening. And there isn't any God. Because if there was, how could he do such a thing? We were praying with all our hearts. There's nothing there. So I can see why people... it's an emotional thing. It's not just a philosophical thing. It's to avoid the suffering. To find some relief. And come to either an atheistic conclusion or impersonal conclusion. Kṛṣṇa. Whoa, Kṛṣṇa Chaitanya, Prabhu Nityananda, Shri Advaita Gadadhar, Srivasadi Gaur Bhaktavinda, Hare Kṛṣṇa, Hare Kṛṣṇa, Kṛṣṇa. So what is the purpose of it all? Did we ever get to that? Yeah, I think Lance stole the punchline. What did he say? Yeah, serve and surrender. But even more than that, yes, all right, you got it. You put it, you find it, yeah, okay, touche. Love. Yeah. In a way, we're being put in a position where we have to develop, like they say, unconditional love. In other words, no matter what condition of life I'm in, I have to stay in that position of, I love God, I love Kṛṣṇa, Radha Kṛṣṇa, Kṛṣṇa Balarāma. Unconditional love. Usually you hear it that God has unconditional love, at least in the Christian culture. God has unconditional love for the living entities. That's usually how you hear it. My father told me one time, he gave me the secret of a good marriage. He said, it's not 50-50. It's 100% and 100%. Each one has to give 100%. Hare Kṛṣṇa, Hare Kṛṣṇa, Kṛṣṇa, Kṛṣṇa. So we also have to develop that unconditional love. Maybe that's part of the big purpose, the big why. No matter what he puts us through. Unconditional. It's a lot, you know. That's a lot. I don't know, that's a lot. Oh, God. Hare Kṛṣṇa, Hare Kṛṣṇa. All right. I don't even know if I want to hear about him. Do I even want to hear about him? I don't know. Oh, Kṛṣṇa. Summary study of the 10th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. It's the medicine. This is the chanting is the medicine, and hearing about Kṛṣṇa and his pastimes. It's the medicine. And what the devotees go through. And how the material world is created. What it is. Hearing all of that's all leading up to reaching the purpose of it all, which is to love Kṛṣṇa. It's not like airy-fairy, unicorns and rainbows. It's heart-wrenching and gutsy kind of stuff that goes on. It's not just warm fuzzies. I mean, it's intense. So, where were we? We're at Kurukshetra during the solar eclipse. all the great saints and sages have come. It's only showing a few there, but you know there had to be like thousands, maybe even millions assembled there at Kṛṣṇa. And Kṛṣṇa and Balarāma are there. So the sages have been offering their prayers, glorifying Kṛṣṇa. And part of what they're saying is, we are also fortunate that today we have been able to directly see your lotus feet. Dear Lord, we are all surrendered souls, devotees of your Lordship. Therefore, please be kind and bestow your causeless mercy upon us. We know well that persons who have become liberated by constant engagement in your devotional service are no longer contaminated by the material modes of nature. Thus, they have become eligible to be promoted to the kingdom of God in the spiritual world. So, persons that are liberated by constantly engaging in devotional service, they're no longer contaminated by modes of material nature, and they become eligible to enter the kingdom of God. After first offering prayers to Lord Kṛṣṇa, the assembled sages I remember hearing that by engaging in devotional service now and becoming free from material desires and more free from the contaminations of the modes of material nature, goodness, passion, and ignorance, then when this life is through, such a person gets to go to where Kṛṣṇa is incarnated in the material world. He's on some planet in some universe somewhere. He's always incarnating within the material world. It's like scheduled. So he's appearing. He appeared here. Ta-da! Now he's appearing somewhere. Like the sun appears and then goes down the horizon. So Kṛṣṇa's like that. He appears, manifests the pastimes, and then he disappears. And then he appears somewhere else, manifests, like it's, 10:30 or something like that, around that here. Well, it's midnight somewhere else. And Kṛṣṇa, so they get to go to that place where he is appearing. Da, 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 da. Become eligible now. And then for further training, because I was thinking about that, we're reading Kṛṣṇa book, and the gopis say, one of their prayers is, they curse Lord Brahma for creating eyelids that blink because they can't see Kṛṣṇa for that moment. Well, wait a minute. There's no Lord Brahma in the spiritual world. He's a demigod here in the material world. Cursing Lord Brahma. What we can get from that, or what I get from that, is a kind of training into the kind of intensity that the gopis have for loving Kṛṣṇa, that they don't want it to be disturbed even momentarily. And that kind of training goes on in the material world when someone who's eligible by practicing gets to actually go where Kṛṣṇa's appearing in the material world. That's why that statement can be made. Those gopis were in further training for going back home, back to Godhead. Otherwise, what they say, Lord Brahma for creating eyelids? There's no Brahma in Goloka. There's Gokula, which is an exact replica of Goloka. But there's no Brahma in Goloka. There's no demons in Goloka. There's only ecstatic, loving relationships with Kṛṣṇa. So you can get an idea of how intense it is by hearing one of their statements, these gopis who are getting further training, the intensity of their statement. You can understand that's further training. Anyway, that's what I get out of it. Until somebody corrects me, I'll just be there with that. All right. Thus, they become eligible to be promoted to the kingdom of God in the spiritual world. After first offering prayers to Lord Kṛṣṇa, the assembled sages wanted to take permission from King Dhritarashtra and King Yudhisthira and depart for their respective ashrams. At that time, however, Vasudeva, the father of Lord Kṛṣṇa, and the most celebrated of all pious men, approached the sages and with great humility offered his respects by falling down at their feet. Vasudeva said, okay, they all wanted to go home. Everything's over. Now they all wanted to go back to wherever they came from. But Vasudeva is approaching them and he says, my dear great sages, you are more respected than the demigods. I therefore offer my respectful obeisances unto you. I wish that you will accept my one request, if you so desire. I shall consider it a great blessing if you kindly explain the supreme fruitive activity by which one can counteract the reactions of all other activities. This ought to be good. Fruitive activity, which counteracts the reactions of all activities. The great sage Narada was the leader of all the sages present there. Therefore he began to speak. This is Narada. My dear sages, he said, it is not very difficult to understand that because of his great goodness and simplicity, Vasudeva has become the father of the personality of Godhead by accepting Kṛṣṇa as his son. And he is inclined to ask us about his welfare. It is said that familiarity breeds contempt. Okay, that's where it came from. That was a very popular little saying amongst the devotees at one time. Familiarity breeds contempt. You become familiar with someone and kind of contempt develops. As such, Vasudeva, having Kṛṣṇa as his son, does not regard Kṛṣṇa with awe and veneration. Sometimes it is seen that persons who are living on the bank of the Ganges do not consider the Ganges to be very important, and they go far away in order to take their baths at a place of pilgrimage. Being that Lord Kṛṣṇa, whose knowledge is never second in any circumstances, is personally present, there's no need of Vasudeva's asking us for instruction. Yeah, familiarity. It's like it's said that a great saintly person is recognized everywhere they go, except in the village where they live. I mean, that's like a reflection when you flip it up this way. I mean, that's Kṛṣṇa in Vraj, right? But when you look at it in the material plane, it's the opposite. So Narada is continuing. Lord Kṛṣṇa is not affected by the process of creation, maintenance, and annihilation. His knowledge is never influenced by any agency beyond himself. He's not agitated by the interaction of the material qualities, which changes things in the modes of time. His transcendental form is full of knowledge, which never becomes agitated by ignorance, pride, attachment, envy, or sense enjoyment. His knowledge is never subjected to the laws of karma regarding pious or impious activities, nor is it influenced by the three modes of material nature. No one is greater than or equal to him because he's the supreme authority, the personality of Godhead. The ordinary conditioned human being may think the conditioned soul, who is covered by his materialistic senses, mind, and intelligence, to be equal to Kṛṣṇa. But Lord Kṛṣṇa is just like the sun, which, although it sometimes may appear to be so, is never covered by the cloud, snow, or fog, or by other planets. When the eyes of less intelligent men are covered by such influences, they think the sun to be invisible. Similarly, persons influenced by the senses and addicted to material enjoyment cannot have a clear vision of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Yeah, that's the problem. You cannot have a clear vision because there's all this other stuff in there. So they may have some perception of, but they can't have a clear vision. The sages, the three modes of material nature, I've heard them described as filters. Like there's pure light, and there are different filters, different covered filters. So looking at things or perceiving things in the mode of goodness, when someone is in that mode, is like a yellow lens that covers, wearing like yellow tinted glasses. And someone absorbed in their mode of operation and activity and thinking and doing things is in the mode of passion. It's like red glasses. And someone in the mode of ignorance, they're absorbed in that mode through a blue lens. And just that's the way I heard it described. And it's not clear anyway, it can be orange or purple or, they mix. Modes mix unlimitedly. But I've heard it described like that. Hare Kṛṣṇa. So someone who's looking at things through colored lens, they can't have a clear perception of Kṛṣṇa, personality of Godhead. The sages present then began to address Vasudeva as in the presence of Lord Kṛṣṇa. Balarāma and many other kings. Like Vasudeva, Narada glorifies Vasudeva and says that he's that he's pure-hearted. Vasudeva's like pure motive, Sudasattva, transcendental goodness. And that's why he's able to have relationship with Kṛṣṇa as his son. But here Vasudeva is praying for help. He doesn't, because he's so close to Kṛṣṇa, and he doesn't have any awe or veneration for Kṛṣṇa. So he's asking for some help. He wants awe and veneration because he sees the danger of familiarity. He's not in Vraj Lila, and for him to take Kṛṣṇa cheaply would be, so he's asking, he wants that awe and veneration. It's part of his relationship with Kṛṣṇa. The sages present then began to address Vasudeva in the presence of Lord Kṛṣṇa, Balarāma, and many other kings. And as requested by him, they gave their instructions. To counteract the reaction of karma, or desires impelling one to fruitive activities, one must execute the prescribed sacrifices, which are meant for worshipping Lord Vishnu with faith and devotion. Lord Vishnu is the beneficiary of the results of all sacrificial performances. Great personalities and sages who are sufficiently experienced to possess vision of the three phases of the time element, past, present, and future, and those who are able to see everything clearly through the eyes of revealed scriptures have unanimously recommended that to purify the dust of material contamination accumulated in the heart and to clear the path of liberation and thereby achieve transcendental bliss, one must please Lord Vishnu. See, Vasudeva is asking this question, and the sages are answering his question. He's asking, what is the topmost activity someone can do to counteract the reactions for all the other activities they do? That's his question. And this is the answer. For everyone in different social orders, Brahmin, Kshatriya, Vaishya, who are living as householders, this worship of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Lord Vishnu, who is known as Purushottama, the original person, is recommended as the only auspicious path. Okay, they're going to be talking about the jivas again here. All conditioned souls within this material world have deep-rooted desires to lord it over the resources of material nature. You know, psychologists, they're always researching. This is a field of research they need to do, and the field of study could be called the Purusha complex. You know, you have the borderline personality, you have this narcissistic personality. Well, here's the Purusha complex. Everyone wants to accumulate riches. Everyone wants to enjoy life to the greatest extent. Everyone wants a wife, except for, women, they want a husband, a home and children, and everyone wants to become happy in this world and be elevated to the heavenly planets in the next life. Okay, so this was a very elevated society. These days, it's hard to find anyone who actually wants this. They don't care where they go. Like one guest at a lecture Prabhupada was giving in public asked the question, so what's wrong with becoming a dog? I think it'd be a great life, be a lot of fun. So, you gotta understand, the sages here are speaking to highly elevated persons, they're highly elevated already. They're not talking to the dogs. But somehow the dogs get to hear this, sitting at the door. Everyone wants to become happy in this world, be elevated to heavenly planets. But these desires are the causes of one's material bondage. Therefore, to get liberation from this bondage, one has to sacrifice his honestly earned riches for the satisfaction of Lord Vishnu. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna. The only process to counteract all sorts of material desire is to engage oneself in the devotional service of Lord Vishnu. In this way, a self-controlled person, even while remaining in household life, should give up the three kinds of material desires. The desire to accumulate material opulences, the enjoyment of wife and children, and elevation to higher planets. Eventually, he may give up householder life and accept a renounced order of life, engaging himself completely in devotional service of the Lord. Everyone, even if born in a higher status of life as a Brahmin, Kshatriya, or Vaishya, is certainly indebted to demigods, to sages, to forefathers, to living entities, and so on. In order to liquidate all these debts, one has to perform sacrifices, study the Vedic literature, generate children in religious household life. So one has to perform these sacrifices. So that was 5,000 years ago. The sacrifice now is the chanting of the Hare Krishna Mahamantra. That's the sacrifice to perform now. Hare Krishna. And as far as giving riches, everyone uses a credit card. They're all in debt up to the wazoo. They got mortgages on their homes, if they own land. So very, very few people are in this category of having riches and wealth. And they're not necessarily, they give in charity. They do. They make a big show of giving in charity. So they're doing something. Krishna says in the Gita, if you can't do this, then do that. If you can't do that, then do this. And he gives a list of things. If you can't surrender to me, then do this other thing, study, perform austerities, and down somewhere on the bottom of the list is given in charity. And it doesn't even have anything to do directly with Krishna. Just somehow or other give up something. If someone accepts the renounced order of life without fulfilling the debt, certainly falls down from his position. Yeah. Generate children. That's a way to pay back the ancestors if you take household life. So someone's in household life, and in order to liquidate all these debts, perform sacrifices, study Vedic literature, and generate children in religious household life. And that pays those debts. To demigods, sages, forefathers, and other living entities. There's a lot of debts. Today, you have already liquidated your debts to your forefathers and sages. Now, by performing sacrifices, you can free yourself from indebtedness to demigods, and thus take complete shelter of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. My dear Vasudeva, certainly you have already performed many pious activities in your previous lives. Otherwise, how could you be the father of Krishna and Balarāma, the Supreme Personality of Godhead? Saintly Vasudeva, after hearing all the sages, offered his respectful obeisances unto their lotus feet. In this way he pleased the sages, and then he elected for them to perform the yagnas. When the sages were elected as priests of the sacrifices, they also, in their turn, induced Vasudeva to collect the required paraphernalia for executing the yagnas in that place of pilgrimage. All this is going on at Kṛṣṇa. Thus, Vasudeva was persuaded to start to perform the yagnas, and all the members of the Yadu dynasty took their baths, dressed themselves very nicely, and decorated themselves beautifully, and garlanded themselves with lotus flowers. Vasudeva's wives, dressed with nice garments and ornaments and golden necklaces, approached the arena of sacrifice, carrying in their hands the required articles to offer in sacrifice. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. We can go for a few more minutes, I guess. Okay. When everything was complete, there was heard the vibration of mridangas, conch shells, kettle drums, and other musical instruments. They do this whenever something auspicious is happening. They make these big sounds with all these drums and conch shells. And Kṛṣṇa. Professional dancers, both male and female, began to dance. The Sutas and Magadhas, who were professional singers, began to offer prayers by singing. The Gandharvas and their wives, whose voices were very sweet, began to sing many auspicious songs. Vasudeva anointed his eyes with collyrium, that's the black stuffs like mascara, smeared butter over his body, and then, along with his 18 wives, headed by Devaki, sat before the priest to be purified by the Abhishek ceremony. That's a bathing ceremony. All such ceremonies were observed strictly according to principles of scriptures, as was done formerly in the case of the moon with the stars. I don't understand that sentence. All such ceremonies were observed strictly according to the principles of scriptures, as was done formerly in the case of the moon and the stars. So the ceremonies were done in accordance with astrological, that seems to indicate there too. Okay. Vasudeva, because he was being initiated for the sacrifice, was dressed in deerskin. But all his wives were dressed with very nice saris, bangles, necklaces, ankle bells, earrings, many other ornaments. Vasudeva looked very beautiful, surrounded by his wives, exactly like the King of Heaven when he performs such sacrifices. So what's going to happen here? Vasudeva's going to get bathed? Is that what he's going to get? Abhishek? At that time, when Lord Kṛṣṇa and Lord Balarāma, along with their wives, children, and relatives, sat down in that great sacrificial arena, it appeared that the Supreme Personality of Godhead was present, along with all his part and parcel living entities and multi-energies. All his part and parcel living entities and multi-energies. We have heard from the Shastras that Lord Kṛṣṇa has multi-energies and parts and parcels, but now in that sacrificial arena, all could actually experience how the Supreme Personality of Godhead eternally exists, along with his different energies. Okay. At that time, Lord Kṛṣṇa appeared as Lord Narayan, so that's a four-armed form, and Lord Balarāma appeared as Kṛṣṇa, the reservoir of all living entities. Yeah. That's Kṛṣṇa and Balarāma. Kṛṣṇa appeared as Narayan, and the shelter of all living entities, and Balarāma appears as Kṛṣṇa, the reservoir of all living entities. Hare Krishna, Hare Ram. Vasudeva satisfied Lord Vishnu by performing different kinds of sacrifices, such as Jyotishtoma, Darsha, and Purnamasa. Some of these yagnas are called Prakrita, and some of them are known as Saryashatra or Vaikrita. So Vasudeva was asking for help because he didn't want to fall into the trap of familiarity breeds contempt, because he considered Kṛṣṇa his son, Kṛṣṇa and Balarāma his sons. So now here's Kṛṣṇa and Balarāma. Narayan is manifesting as Narayan and Kṛṣṇa, with all his multi-energies and all the living entities that emanate from him. So there you go, Vasudeva. Hare Krishna. Some of these yagnas are called Prakrita, and some of them are known as Saryashatra or Vaikrita. Thereafter, the other sacrifices known as Agnihotra were also performed, and the prescribed articles were offered in the proper way. So Agnihotra is a fire sacrifice, and that was also performed afterwards. In this way, Lord Vishnu became pleased. The ultimate purpose of offering oblations in sacrifice is to please Lord Vishnu. But in this age of Kali, it's very difficult to collect the different articles required for offering sacrifices. People have neither the means to collect the required paraphernalia, nor the necessary knowledge or tendency to offer such sacrifices. And the Brahmins, they're not even qualified to recite the mantras. Therefore, in this age of Kali, when people are mostly unfortunate, full of anxieties, disturbed by various kinds of calamities, the only sacrifice recommended is the performance of Sankirtan Yagna. That's congregational chanting. Worshipping Lord Chaitanya by this Sankirtan Yagna is the only recommended process in this age. That's the fire. Sankirtan Yagna is the fire. After the performance of the different sacrifices, Vasudeva offered ample riches, clothing, ornaments, cows, land, maidservants to the priests. Thereafter, all the wives of Vasudeva took their avabrita baths and performed the part of the sacrificial duties known as Patni Samyaja. I don't know what this avabrita bath is, but it's a bath they take after a sacrifice. After finishing the offering with all the required paraphernalia, they all took their baths together in the lakes constructed by Parashuram, which are known as Rama Radha. After Vasudeva and his wives took their baths, all the garments and ornaments which they wore were distributed to the subordinate persons who were engaged in singing, dancing, and similar activities. So they all got prashadam. We may note that the performance of sacrifice necessitates the profuse distribution of riches. Charity is offered to the priests and the Brahmins in the beginning, and used garments and ornaments are offered in charity to the subordinate assistants after the performance of the sacrifice. After offering the used articles to the singers and reciters, Vasudeva and his wives, dressed with new ornaments and dresses, fed everyone very sumptuously. And now, a word from our sponsor. Hare Kṛṣṇa. Hare Kṛṣṇa. Thank you. Hare Rama, Hare Rama. They fed everyone very sumptuously, beginning from the brahmanas down to the dogs. After this, all the friends, family members, wives, and children of Vasudeva, along with all the kings and members of the Vidarbha, Koshala, Kuru, Kasi, Kekaya, and Srinjaya dynasties, assembled together. All the kings and members of all these dynasties assembled. The priests, the demigods, the people in general, the forefathers, the ghosts, and the charanas were all sufficiently remunerated by being offered ample gifts and respectful honor. Boy, everybody, even the ghosts. Then all the persons assembled there took permission from Lord Kṛṣṇa, the husband of the goddess of fortune. And while glorifying the perfection of the sacrifice made by Vasudeva, they departed to their respective homes. At that time, when King Dhritarashtra, Vidura, Yudhishthira, Bhima, Arjuna, Bhimashane, Dronacharya, Kunti, Nakula, Sahadeva, Narada, Lord Vyasadeva, and many other relatives and kinsmen, this is all from the Kuru side, the Kurus and Pandavas, and many other relatives and kinsmen were about to part, they felt separation, and therefore embraced each and every member of the Yadu dynasty with great feeling. Many others who were assembled there in that sacrificial arena also departed. After this, Lord Kṛṣṇa and Lord Balarāma, along with King Ugrasen, satisfied the inhabitants of Vṛndāvana, headed by Maharaj Nanda and the cowherd men, by profusely offering all kinds of gifts in order to worship them and please them. Out of their great feelings of friendship, the inhabitants of Vṛndāvana remained there for a considerable time, along with the members of the Yadu dynasty. After performing the sacrifice, Vasudeva felt so satisfied that there was no limit to his happiness. All the members of his family were with him, and in their presence he caught hold of the hands of Nanda Maharaj and addressed him thus: "My dear brother, the Supreme Personality of Godhead has created a great tie of bondage, which is known as the bondage of love and affection. I think it is a very difficult job for even the great sages and saintly persons to cut such a tie of love. My dear brother, you have exhibited feelings of love for me, which I was not able to return. I think, therefore, that I am ungrateful. You have behaved exactly as is characteristic of a saintly person, but I shall never be able to repay you. I have no means to repay you for your friendly dealings. Nevertheless, I am confident that our tie of love will never break. Our relationship of friendship must ever continue, in spite of my inability to repay you. I hope you will excuse me for this inability. My dear brother, in the beginning, due to my being imprisoned, I could never serve you as a friend, and although at the present moment I am very opulent, because of my material prosperity, I have become blind. I therefore cannot satisfy you properly even at this time. My dear brother, you are so nice and gentle that you offer all respect to others, but you don't care for any respect for yourself. A person seeking for auspicious progress in life must not possess too much material opulence with which to become blind and puffed up, but he should take care of his friends and relatives." When Vasudeva was speaking to Nanda Maharaj in this way, he was influenced by a great feeling for the friendship of Nanda Maharaj and the beneficial activities executed by King Nanda on his behalf. As such, his eyes filled with tears, and he began to cry. Desiring to please his friend Vasudeva and being affectionately bound with love for Lord Kṛṣṇa and Balarāma, Nanda Maharaj passed 3 months in their association. At the end of this time, all the members of the Yadu dynasty tried to please the inhabitants of Vṛndāvana to their heart's content. The members of the Yadu dynasty tried to satisfy Nanda Maharaj and his associates by offering them clothes, ornaments, many other valuable articles, and they all became fully satisfied. Vasudeva, Ugrasena, Lord Kṛṣṇa, Lord Balarāma, Uddhava, and all other members of the Yadu dynasty presented their individual gifts to Nanda Maharaj and his associates. After Nanda Maharaj received these farewell presentations, he, along with his associates, started for Brajabhumi, Vṛndāvana. The minds of the inhabitants of Vṛndāvana remained, however, with Kṛṣṇa and Balarāma, and therefore all of them started for Vṛndāvana without their minds. When the members of the Vishnu family saw all their friends and visitors departing, they observed that the rainy season was approaching, and thus they decided to return to Dwarka. They were fully satisfied, for they regarded Kṛṣṇa as everything. When they returned to Dwarka, they began with great satisfaction to describe the sacrifice performed by Vasudeva, their meeting with various friends and well-wishers, and various other incidences which occurred during their travels in the places of pilgrimage. Ends purports of the 83rd chapter, Sacrificial Ceremonies. So Kṛṣṇa, he never leaves Vṛndāvana. In Goloka, the eternal spiritual world, there's no solar eclipse of the sun. There's no gathering at Kṛṣṇa. So this is pastimes that take place when Kṛṣṇa manifests on the earth planet. When he manifests in the material world, these pastimes take place. And those living entities, like we read before, who have been engaging in devotional service and have become free from the influences of the material modes, who are eligible to enter into the kingdom of God, they go where Kṛṣṇa is appearing personally for further training in developing what? This love, intensity and moods of love. So here, I'm looking at this, when it says the minds of the inhabitants of Vṛndāvana remained with Kṛṣṇa and Balarāma. But Kṛṣṇa and Balarāma never leave Vṛndāvana in Goloka. So this is a pastime taking place here for further training in becoming so absorbed in love of Kṛṣṇa and Balarāma that they lose their minds. But one way to say it. The minds of the inhabitants remained with Kṛṣṇa and Balarāma. And Kṛṣṇa and Balarāma are going to Dwarka. But in Goloka they don't go to Dwarka. They're always in Vṛndāvana. So this is their mood. The intensity is they lost their minds. Their minds. Anyway, that's what I see. Hare Krishna. Further training. Engage now and get further training later. Directly by Kṛṣṇa when he appears somewhere in the material world. Wow. You know, it's like, it can't get any more intense, right? I think it's so intense, it can't get any more intense. Oh yeah? Hare Krishna. Haribo. Thank you, Lance. Thanks for stopping by. Yeah, we're on our way. We're on our way. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. Glories to Srila Prabhupada. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna, Krishna. Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama. Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. It's like Prabhupada's like directing traffic, you know. It's that way. Just that way. Here. That way. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna, Krishna. Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama. Rama Rama, Hare Hare.